If you've been to the Sun Station, it's really intense visually. The design is just genius, and there's a part where you blow the emergency exit doors, I believe, and then you have to jump right over the surface of the sun. And it's such an intense thing, and then to learn this intense information, it syncs up really nicely. I want gameplay and narrative to be as interwoven as humanly possible. They should be the same cloth.
"2019's Outer Wilds was a gift from a friend. Someone I've never met, but who is incredibly close to me and who, knowing me just as well as the people who've come up with me face to face and by my side, knew the game's themes would resonate with me for the same reasons they resonated with her. And she was right. Outer Wilds is unlike any other game I've ever played. It is a masterpiece of narrative and design that left me not only staggered and stunned over what I'd just taken part in and experienced, but also disappointed and even angry that there were no to few other games like this being made in the industry. Outer Wilds sets you free into a clockwork universe with no goal or reward before you beyond knowledge and curiosity. Areas and zones are not locked behind abilities and power-ups. Information is not revealed to you because you've made it through the story in the right order. Every inch of the game is accessible to you right from the very start, including its ending. You can go anywhere and do anything, and through experimentation, through learning and following your curiosity, you will discover the great and oftentimes terrible secrets of Outer Wilds. So today, I'm going to talk about one of those great and terrible secrets. I'm going to talk about how the path to discovering it and the aftermath of what you learn not only fulfills an outstanding marriage of narrative and game design, but how it also lays out the themes and values of Outer Wilds. The game's first zone, Timber Hearth, does everything in its power to prepare you for what's to come. This is the only time the game gives you a direct instruction, introducing you to a world of characters who eagerly await your travels, who want to hear the stories you will bring back to them. Right from the start, the game instills a value in curiosity and knowledge, into going out and exploring the world and learning. Blasting off on your ship for the first time might be quite intimidating, as you may not truly know where to go at first. If you're anything like me, you landed on Atoll Rock and spoke to Esker, finding him through the use of your signal scope. On your first loop, you could learn so many different things. You could discover the hidden depths and quirks of the many planets in the system. You could locate the other travelers following their music to speak to each of them in turn. You could stumble into the game's toughest mysteries with no idea of how to replicate your incredible feats. But the one thing that will always happen to you, the thing you will always discover, is death. At the end of your first loop, through misadventure or the exploding sun, you are going to die. You will die and return 22 minutes earlier, gasping for breath and unsure of what's going on. But now you have a mystery to solve. So you climb back into your ship, and you blast off once again, ready to face this universe and its secrets, determined to find out what's destroying the sun. After all, that's obviously what this game is about. You're supposed to stop the sun from exploding and save everyone around you. You just need to figure out how. Eventually, you might learn the details of a plan formed by the Nomai. On Giant's Deep and the probe cannon that orbits it, you discover that whatever secret project the alien Nomai were working on, it required blowing up the sun itself. The Nomai intended to use the supernova to power something, and though the Nomai might be thousands of years dead, their strange technology has clearly started working, destroying your sun, and maybe even trapping you in this time loop. So you decide to pay a visit to the Nomai Sun Station, a solar satellite orbiting the sun, barely off the edge of its surface, tearing through space at incredible and dangerous speeds. If you're determined and stubborn enough, you may be able to land your ship on the sun station itself and enter that way, a feat so difficult that it earns you one of the game's rarest achievements. What is more likely is that you find the teleporter on Ash Twin, and when you finally make it onto the sun station, you find that it's empty, dark. It feels surprisingly cold for something hanging over a dying star. There's a door at the edge of the hallway, but when you open it... At some point during your journey, you learn about your spaceship's eject button, and I can think of no better example of the kind of dumb bravery we can find in ourselves across this game as we search for crumbs of knowledge. Dropping my ship with absolutely no elegance onto the surface of a planet currently crumbling into a black hole, I hammer the eject button and launch myself from the ship, knowing that I no longer need the vessel, knowing that I am as likely to fail on this run as I am to succeed. I'm going to die anyway. I've no plans of leaving this planet alive. In fact, I found that the further I got into the game, the more I developed a calculated recklessness, a willingness to throw myself into these situations. The game did not force this on me. I could have played as conservatively as I wanted, but the game set up a situation where death, where failure, is an inconvenience, where failure is no longer a thing to fear. I can choose to be reckless. I can decide just to go for it. Failure in Outer Wilds is just a learning experience. Outer Wilds encourages you to take daring risks, sprinting through dark caverns, clinging to flying islands and leaping across dark chasms, all in search of the next breadcrumb, desperate for knowledge, for the next piece of the puzzle, or to simply behold the next incredible sight. The developers want curiosity to be your motivator and knowledge to be your reward, and that desire is a potent thing when the game's mysteries and stories have their hooks into you. You need to find out what happened to the Nomai, what became of their experiments and their people, and more importantly, you need to find out what they did to your sun and why it's exploding. So sure, since you're going to die anyway, why not throw caution to the wind and dedicate yourself to solving this problem at all costs? After all, you're going to die in 22 minutes. It's best to live your life now, whilst you have it. The door flies away, sent drifting into the debris of space. The bridge in the sun station's center was destroyed a long time ago. But you need to get to the other side, and you've already died so many times that one more death doesn't really matter to you. If this doesn't work out, you'll just try again. So you jump, and the gravity of the sun station keeps you locked in. You drift towards the door, and in this incredibly brief spacewalk, you get to appreciate the view. The sun, barely held at bay by the distance between you and it, the ruins of the Nomai and their magnificent culture. In the distance, you may even see planets, each with their own wonderful quirk. You may even see your own planet. You might even see home. And further beyond the planets, you see the stars and... dear God, are they beautiful. The universe of Outer Wilds is a dangerous and unforgiving place at times. Death lurks around every corner, it hovers over the horizon from moment one. But the beauty of the universe beyond your solar system persists anyway. Aren't the stars just so very beautiful? Isn't everything you've seen so very beautiful? On one of my journeys, I set a course for the Ember Twin, one of the two planets spinning around each other as they, in turn, orbit the sun. And as they dance together, the Ash Twin pours its sand into Ember Twin. Beyond beauty, this also serves a mechanical purpose. You see, as more of Ash Twin becomes explorable, opening paths to the teleportation towers as well as the path that will take you to Sun Station, this relationship leads to Ember Twin becoming less explorable. This locks off critical paths, the growing sand leaving the lowest caverns and passages of Ember Twin inaccessible until you return earlier in another loop. And if, like me, you're in one of those passages as it finishes filling with sand, well, if you're like me, you search for an exit frantically. You backtrack as fast as possible, but the rising sand makes it hard to fully remember your way, and it's so dark in this cave. By the time you find an exit, it's already too late. You wheel around, desperation flooding your mind and robbing you of your senses.
No, I was so close. I was so close.
The cavern fills up anyway. It's lifting you up to the ceiling and you realize just how you're going to die. Crushed to death between the sand and rock far below the surface of this planet. If the game let you scream, you could shout for help, but it wouldn't matter because you're simply that alone. Except, well, you're not. You're by yourself, but you don't have to die alone. If you're like me, you pull out your signal scope and point it at one of the walls, setting the frequencies to Outer Wilds Ventures, and you search for someone. Even down here, those frequencies are still available. You find Rybeck, terrified, scared Rybeck, on another planet just as dangerous as this one, playing their banjo all alone. Except they too are not alone, not really. Because when you point your signal scope at another planet, you can hear Esker. You can hear Gabbro and Chert and even Feldspar, and you can't see the planets they're on, but that doesn't matter because you can hear them and you don't have to die alone.
Back in the very beginning stages, we were talking about having the different travelers on different planets, and then I kind of crafted the concept with Alex of having them like actually all playing the same tune, not having them play different songs. Like I was like, we should have them play together, so it's kind of grasp this approach where like no matter where you're at, like the world can be like a smaller place through music, and like you can be connected that way.
You may leave your own world behind you, but that does not mean that you're alone in the solar system. Far from it. On every single planet, even the impossible quantum moon and the dreaded dark bramble, there are friends you can meet. There's always someone to talk to, another traveler who has walked a semblance of your path and is willing to share what they've learned. Talking to them often reveals fascinating information. Gabbro is stuck in a time loop just like you. Solomon knows she's dead. Chert is studying the stars, which has led them to realize that... well, we'll get to that later. Outer Wilds asks you to brave the dangers and unknowns of every planet in the system, from the depths of Giant's Deep to the fog of Dark Bramble and the crumbling ledges of Brittle Hollow. You are going to die in this game so many times, and there will be points where it is frustrating and heart-wrenching and terrifying. But whether you're being eaten by anglerfish, crushed to death by sand by yourself in a dark cave, or you're drifting within the interloper, mourning the fate of the Nomai, you can, at any point, pull out your signal scope and point it toward another planet. And no matter how far away they are, you can hear music. In Outer Wilds, there is always a song reaching out. From the edge of a planet, drifting into the void of space, someone is letting you know they're there. They might not always be with you in person, but their spirit remains. Before drifting into Dark Bramble, you can still turn your signal scope on Brittle Hollow and hear Rybeck's guitar. You'll hear the song of someone who does not consider themselves brave and yet still pushed out into the black of space in search of knowledge. If Rybeck can be brave, so can you. From your friends, you can find bravery, contentment, curiosity, determination, appreciation, and you can carry that with you. Outer Wilds asks you to face the world by yourself. It never asks you to face the world alone. You land on the other side of the sun station, catching your breath. The ride from one side to the other was short but exhilarating. A strange combination of panic and beauty all wrapped up into one. But that's over now, and you have business here. Chances are this isn't the end of the road. The developers wouldn't put the final solution to all of your problems in this one zone. You know this. After all, there are so many other hanging threads for you to discover, but finally, you're at the end of this mystery. This is where you're going to find out what the Nomai did to the sun. And from there, you can extrapolate how to undo their insane experiment.
A lot of it too was figuring out where good story reveals would happen, because obviously if you look at more linear games, you know where like your big moments are, you know where your boss battles are, you know where your like crossing the threshold moment is, that kind of stuff. But here obviously, since the pacing is completely up to the player and where they're going is up to them, we kind of had to figure out a different way to control what those big moments were and to kind of ratchet up the tension accordingly. That was a huge part of placing it in a good spot, but also a visually arresting spot, syncing it up with the music, syncing it up with cool visuals, and then also making you work to get to that location, making that a challenge in terms of gameplay, and then also making it something that, you know, you followed clues, you're invested in the story in some regard, and then once you get it, there's a satisfying moment in finding that answer, but also there's usually a next bit to it where there's a bit of a twist where you're like, oh, that's why they were creating this thing, or like that's what happened when they ran this experiment, and like there are consequences to that.
The final room of the sun station reveals a lot. Reading the text inside, you learn more of their plan to blow up the sun to power the Ash Twin project, something you may or may not have context for at this point. But the wall of text, it reveals that the Nomai failed. They couldn't make the sun go supernova. Despite their technology, despite their every attempt, they failed to explode the sun. Their Ash Twin project never saw reality. They mourn together in this moment, considering their enormous project to be a failure, and we mourn with them, just for different reasons. We, too, wish they had succeeded, because this means that I'm going to tell you a story about a precursor race. Their story is told somewhat in parallel to that of our protagonist's present-day story. With breadcrumbs being fed to us to entice our curiosity, we learn about the incredible technology they created and the tragic death from which they failed to save themselves. We learn of a danger that now faces us, and we must rely on their unfinished experiments and technology to not only follow in their footsteps, but finish what they started. I am, of course, talking about the Isu from Assassin's Creed. Precursors in fiction, especially in video games, all tend to have a similar mouthfeel. You could make an argument that the plot beats behind the Isu are incredibly similar to those of the Nomai, at least when viewed from the perspective of what the critical path tells us. Except, despite playing almost every game in the Assassin's Creed franchise, I know nothing about the Isu as people. I don't know their characters, not really. I can't actually tell you what separates Juno from Jupiter. We're told at the end of Assassin's Creed 3 that her release is a bad thing, and I don't remember why. I mean, as far as I can tell, she's just another ancient precursor, as enigmatic and aloof and all-knowing as every other ancient precursor the series has presented me with so far.
So, one thing that took a lot of iteration here was the Nomai voice, but this was huge because this is what you're with for so much of the game. Honestly, I spent probably multiple years getting it right, because the Nomai fall into a little bit of the ancient alien trope, and we did not want them to feel, I'm not going to name drop the Chozo, but I'm actually exactly going to name drop the Chozo, as much as I love Metroid Prime and all. The we thing, the hive mind, those pronouns are so difficult to connect with. It is hard to connect with a group in that way.
The idea of aliens who appeared beyond human in their characterization was something that Outer Wilds lead writer Kelsey Beecham specifically wanted to avoid. The players have to love the Nomai, and outlining their culture and personalities, allowing the player to truly care about what they want, is what allows the tragedy of their demise to truly be a tragedy, not simply new lore for the player to pick up. Kelsey was careful to have the Nomai focus on I and not we when describing their goals. The Nomai all have a collective goal, yes, to reach the eye of the universe, but their individual beliefs, personalities, methods, ideas, and idiosyncrasies whirl around each other as readily as the planets spin through the solar system. And you don't hear the Nomai speaking in stilted, enigmatic terms. The typical, we wish for this, these are our goals dialogue does not characterize the Nomai's writing. Instead, we hear from individual Nomai about their reasons. I want to reach the eye of the universe to prove myself as a scientist. I want to reach the eye of the universe because otherwise I doubt our separation from the rest of our people would have been worthwhile. I want to reach the eye of the universe because I have been raised to want this, but I'm not sure if we even truly would benefit from finding it. I want to reach the eye of the universe to see what's over that horizon.
Humanizing them makes them more relatable and interesting. The Nomai needed to be folks the player wanted to spend time with.
And I think it's fair to say the team succeeded. Players have shown an absolute love of the Nomai, following many of them from their youths to adulthoods, laughing at their terrible jokes, smiling in delight as they flirt during business meetings. We love the Nomai, and the greatest part of their writing, despite how much we love them, we never get to meet them. Now this is the point where several people may be typing in the comments section that, no, in fact, Miss Robot Lady, we did meet one of the Nomai, we met Solanum. And yes, in one of the game's most wonderful surprises, Solanum can be met on the Quantum Moon, and she is just as delightful and wonderful as the rest of her species. But she does not stand in as a representative for her species. By that point, I had already started considering them to be my favorite use of the precursor species concept in all of science fiction. As much as I love her, and as much as she improves the game, not having Solanum would not have made the Nomai unlikable or distant characters. In fact, there may be members of the audience who have finished the game, and who don't know what I'm talking about. Meeting Solanum is entirely optional, something the players may miss if they can't figure out the mysteries of the Quantum Moon. But even those players, if they've paid attention, may still know Solanum. You may know her from her drawings and scribbles, having met her in a schoolhouse on Brittle Hollow, having met her through time, through her words. She is the only Nomai that we ever meet. A figure, A traveller stepping out of history to say, "Hello, who are you? Would you like to be friends?" In the same way that a separation of space cannot stop you from feeling the warmth and companionship of your friends on other planets, a separation of time does not stop you from delighting in the Nomai. When you've finished reading the text in Sun Station, you may explore the rest of the room and find a sensor array. This sensor bears a chilling countdown. You see, it's been measuring the sun's lifespan, and it's going to explode soon. That's why the game's events started. Not because Nomai tech blew up the sun, but because whatever the Nomai did, their Ash Twin project, was finally turned on by your already exploding sun. You weren't given this time-traveling ability for a reason. The Nomai didn't blow up your sun. It's dying on its own. Your goal in Outer Wilds is not to save the solar system. You're not meant to save your people. You cannot save yourself. You're going to die in a few minutes, as will everyone you've ever met. And there is nothing you can do to stop that. Now, I have a question for the audience. Raise your hands if you've ever made friends with a person you've never met face to face before. Maybe you have a pen pal, someone you text often, friends you meet in an online game or over a Discord server. For decades now, we've been forming connections and friendships with people all over the world, many of us getting to speak to people with perspectives we never could have dreamed of experiencing. Without money to travel, places like the United States, where so many of my friends live, functionally may as well be on another planet to me, or 1,000 years in the past. I cannot reach it or the friends who live there without incurring a great expense and months on months of planning. And yet, I have friends there. Friends who know me so well that one of them could buy me this game knowing full well it would suit my tastes, that its themes would resonate with me, heart and mind and soul. We're so readily told by breathy think pieces and certain people that technology has left us disconnected. But the fact is that whatever connects and disconnects us is down to who we are and what we choose to do with the tools at our disposal. Most of my closest friends are people whose faces I've never seen, but it does not invalidate what they mean to me. Nor does it invalidate the things we've taught each other or the things they've helped me get through. Back in December, I caught COVID-19. In fact, I actually caught it a second time during the production of this video, and I had to go into quarantine. That first time happened leading up to Christmas, with Christmas Eve being my final day of quarantine. I had to sit in my room and watch my family come together through my window because I could not leave that room. On those days, they may as well have been as far away as my friends around the world. They may as well have been on other planets, or in other times. The friends whose relationship I had no change with were the long-distance friends, the friends who I could speak to in the exact same manner I always had, and I clung to that. On more than one night, I needed them. You hear about the survivability of COVID, and yes, I did survive, but that doesn't make living with it anything pleasant. My breathing was laboured, almost feeling like an active process on some days. I went to bed at night scared, as most sleeping positions put even more strain on that breathing. I often woke up in the middle of the night, struggling to breathe and uncertain if these were the effects of the virus or just my own anxieties over having it. What got me through this in the end were my friends. It was people who spoke to me through text messages and voice calls for hours, talking me through nights of COVID, not just keeping me company during quarantine, where I was more separated from the world than ever before, but through the scariest and most terrifying flashes and thoughts of death. And one of those things that we talked about was Outer Wilds and what it means to be alive, what it means to remember that you are going to die. The cycle isn't over. I have other things I can try to accomplish. I have to go back to my ship on Ash Twinnet, check my ship's log, try to make sense of what's just happened. I can't just sit here for the next 10 minutes and wait for the sun to explode. So, I turn my back on what I've just learned. I turn my back on the exploding sun, and I leave that room behind me. I walk to the edge of Sun Station and stare across the space I had jumped through moments earlier. I think about how I'd just wondered at its beauty, now burdened with the knowledge that the world I'm watching will end. And it's at this point that I finally accept another secret the game's been trying to tell me. This might happen at any point in the game. You might even find out from a series of discussions with Chert, who has come to the same terrifying understanding. Across the 22-minute cycle of Outer Wilds, the stars are going out. One by one, across the night sky, you can see their explosions. It's the same one being made by our own sun. It's not just our sun that's going out. It's not just our solar system that's dying. The entire universe is dying. All of it. Everything, everyone. It's all dying. We're watching the heat death of the universe, and there isn't a damn thing we can do to stop it. I try to think of something, anything else, but I can't. There are no more digressions from this. There is no escaping or running away from this. It will come sooner or later, so I may as well stop cutting away from the point. All I can do is jump out into that void and try to get to my ship. And this moment, this is the most beautiful moment in Outer Wilds, to me. Because as I drift from one tower to another, I see all the things I saw before, and all of it is still so beautiful. It's beautiful in spite of the fact that it is going to die, that it will burn to ashes and drift as particles in space. In just a few minutes, all life in our solar system will end, and not long after that, all life everywhere will end. But for now, that life stays beautiful. It will be beautiful up until its final second. As long as there is a single star in the night sky, it will be beautiful. In the real world, all the stars are exploding. They're exploding all the time, dying constantly from one second to another, and we stare at them from the ground, clinging desperately to a giant rock blitzing through the universe at an unimaginable speed, and we say the stars are beautiful. If the stars were alive and they could see us, I'd like to imagine that they look at us and say we're beautiful too, even if we're all dying. Because the stars are not beautiful in spite of dying. Stars are beautiful because they are dying. It would be disingenuous to suggest that Outer Wilds just wants us to acknowledge and accept that we are going to die. Yes, it's a core and vital part of the game's messaging, but it's not all the game has to say. And I think that Solanum suggests this idea the best. At the end of the game, there's an easily missable line of dialogue from her. If you're not ready to start the new universe, to take the next step, she says, "It is tempting to linger in this moment, while every possibility still exists. But until they are collapsed by an observer, they will only ever be possibilities." Exploring the surface of a collapsing planet, swimming through the waters of your home only to be ejected by its natural geysers, playing music with your friends, flirting and loving and laughing, creating science and art and memories. This is living. We go out into the world in spite of dying and demand a place in it. We scream until the universe hears us and tells us that we are beautiful. We sit quietly and enjoy the moments that we have. All of this is living. We take the next step because we cannot let our lives simply be possibilities. And we take each step together. Because even in your hardest moments, whether you are facing the difficulties of a cruel and unkind world, or drifting in space over a sun that you cannot stop exploding, you can always reach out to your friends. Outer Wilds looks you in the eye and says, "Congratulations, you're going to die one day, and now you're free. Go enjoy the rest of your life. Remember to bring a friend. Remember to pack your marshmallows." I often think back to those nights in December, scared of my own breathing, comforted by the voice of a friend and replaying the most beautiful moment of Outer Wilds. Drifting over the sun, the glory of the soon-to-end universe spread out before me. By myself, but never alone.
Oh, hello. Come, sit with me, my fellow travelers. Let's sit together and watch the stars die.